a cup of lukewarm airport tea, patting her frail shoulder. "Just sit tight here in the lounge, Mom," he told her, his voice dripping with false warmth. "We're just going to check the luggage and we'll come right back." I watched them walk away, but as my parents reached the automatic doors, they didn't head toward the check-in desk. They headed straight for the parking garage. That's when the horrifying realization hit me like a physical blow. They were never coming back. They were abandoning her, leaving her alone with nothing but a cheap suitcase and her fading memory, all so they could rush back and illegally auction off her multi-million-dollar farm. My own parents thought they had executed the perfect white-collar crime. They thought a helpless old woman couldn't fight back.
But they completely forgot about me.
My name is Ashley. I'm 28 years old, and until recently, I believed that the bonds of family were unbreakable. I thought that no matter how cruel the outside world became, the people who gave you life would always protect you. But I was wrong. Sometimes, the most dangerous monsters aren't strangers hiding in the dark. They are the people sitting right across from you at the Sunday dinner table, smiling while they quietly plan your absolute destruction. To understand the depth of the betrayal that tore my family apart, you have to understand my grandmother, Evelyn, and the paradise she built with her own two hands. For over 40 years, she poured her soul into Whispering Pines, a breathtaking, sprawling 500-acre organic heritage farm nestled in the heart of Oregon. It's a gorgeous landscape of rolling green hills, ancient oak trees, and historic barns that have been in our family for generations. But as the nearby city expanded, that peaceful farmland transformed into a gold mine. Developers were practically drooling over it, offering multi-million-dollar deals to flatten the trees and pour concrete over my grandmother's life's work. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, didn't care about heritage. They were drowning in massive, secret corporate debts from failed business ventures and a desperate need to maintain their country club lifestyle. When Grandma Evelyn was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's, they didn't see a tragedy. They saw a golden opportunity. They thought her fading memory made her the perfect, helpless victim for a quick, lucrative cash grab. They thought they could manipulate her into signing away everything. But her occasional memory lapses didn't make her weak, and their arrogant assumption would become the exact catalyst for their ultimate undoing. The trap was sprung on a rainy Tuesday morning under the guise of a peaceful family vacation. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, had spent weeks spinning an elaborate lie to my grandmother. They told her that a relaxing trip to a luxury wellness resort in Southern California was exactly what the doctors recommended to help stimulate her fading memory. Grandma Evelyn, trusting her only son completely, packed her small vintage suitcase with a gentle smile. They insisted I come along, claiming they needed my youthful energy to help manage the airport logistics. I agreed without a second thought, completely blind to the darkness hidden behind their synthetic smiles. The air inside Terminal 2 was thick with the scent of jet fuel and nervous energy. After passing through security, my dad guided Grandma Evelyn into a quiet corner of the busy airport lounge, gently adjusting her coat. "Just sit tight right here in the lounge, Mom," he told her, his voice dripping with a sickening, manufactured warmth. "We're just going to check the heavy luggage at the main counter, and we'll come right back for you." I watched them walk toward the exit, but as they reached the sliding glass doors, a cold dread pooled in my stomach. They weren't heading toward the airline desk. They were walking briskly toward the exit to the parking garage. When I realized they never intended to return, I confronted them in the breezeway, my voice shaking with fury. Before I could scream for help, my father violently shoved me into the back seat of our parked SUV, slamming the door lock. My own parents were abandoning a vulnerable woman with Alzheimer's alone in a crowded airport, planning to speed back to Oregon to illegally auction off her beloved farm. I fought desperately, kicking the door until the lock mechanism snapped. I broke free from the vehicle and sprinted back through the terminal, my heart pounding against my ribs as I desperately scanned the ocean of moving strangers. Before I tell you what I found in that crowded lounge, follow my story until you can see how far my grandmother's legacy has reached. I burst through the glass doors of the crowded airport lounge, my lungs burning and my vision blurred with tears of absolute panic. I fully expected to find my grandmother crying, terrified, or wandering aimlessly through the terminal, completely consumed by the fog of her illness. Instead, the scene before me stopped me dead in my tracks. Grandma Evelyn was sitting calmly at a corner table, sipping her tea, engaged in what looked like a deep and intense conversation with a distinguished, silver-haired gentleman dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. This wasn't a random traveler passing time between flights. As I approached their table with a racing heart, the man stood up and introduced himself as Arthur Vance. He was a highly prominent, recently retired federal land attorney. He explained that he had been sitting nearby and noticed the suspicious way my parents had hurried away. Sensing something was terribly wrong, he had stepped in to comfort her, but he quickly realized that my grandmother didn't need comforting. She needed an ally. As I knelt by her side, a profound shift occurred. The heavy fog of Alzheimer's seemed to miraculously lift from my grandmother's eyes, replaced by a sudden, razor-sharp focus that I hadn't seen in months. She gripped my hand tightly and looked directly at Arthur. "I always knew my son was blinded by greed," she said, her voice steady and resolute. She revealed that she had quietly suspected their sinister plot for months and had already set a brilliant defensive backup plan into motion. While Arthur, Grandma Evelyn, and I were aligning our forces at the airport, a completely different and sinister scene was unfolding back in Oregon. Believing their vulnerable victim was safely stranded hundreds of miles away without a phone or a clue, my parents, Richard and Eleanor, broke every speed limit racing back to Whispering Pines. To them, the clock was ticking, and their desperate hunger for fast cash had completely blinded them to the morality of what they were doing. They truly believed they had executed the perfect crime and were about to reap the rewards. By the time they pulled up the long gravel driveway of the estate, an aggressive, private cash buyer auction was already in full swing. My parents had secretly orchestrated this gathering weeks in advance, inviting cutthroat real estate developers who didn't care about family history or zoning laws. Sleek black SUVs lined the vibrant green grass, and wealthy investors crowded around a makeshift podium. The air was thick with the rapid-fire chatter of the auctioneer, who was already taking multi-million-dollar bids on the historic barn and the fertile soil that my grandmother loved so dearly. My parents stood near the porch, practically drooling as they watched the numbers on the digital bidding board skyrocket. But just as the auctioneer lifted his wooden gavel into the air, preparing to slam it down and finalize the fraudulent sale under a forged power of attorney, 3 local sheriff deputy cruisers roared up the driveway, their sirens echoing across the hills. Stepping out of the lead vehicle was Arthur Vance, closely followed by Ashley and a smiling Grandma Evelyn. The sudden wail of the sirens brought the entire illegal auction to a grinding halt. The greedy developers murmured in confusion, lowering their bidding paddles as the deputies fanned out across the manicured lawn. Richard and Eleanor froze, their faces twisting from triumphant grins to masks of pure shock. But my father, ever the arrogant narcissist, quickly tried to laugh it off. He stepped forward, smoothing his expensive suit, and tried to gaslight the authorities. He loudly claimed that Grandma Evelyn was mentally incompetent, wandering away due to her tragic condition, and that they were simply managing her estate assets for her own protection. To prove his absolute authority, Richard reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out an official-looking manila folder, thrusting the legal papers toward the lead deputy. He proudly declared that they possessed a legally binding power of attorney that gave them the absolute right to sell every single inch of Whispering Pines. But before the deputy could even glance at the documents, Arthur Vance calmly stepped forward, his eyes burning with cold determination. He snatched the folder from my father's hands, reviewing the clauses on the spot with the seasoned precision of a federal land attorney. Arthur let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut through the tense silence. He pointed directly at the signature page and revealed a fatal, criminal flaw. The power of attorney my parents were using had been executed weeks after Evelyn's official, certified medical diagnosis of cognitive decline, rendering it completely void under state law. Worse yet, they had entirely overlooked a hidden non-transferable clause in the original deed. Realizing they were trapped, my furious parents fiercely threatened to sue us and lock Grandma Evelyn away in a state asylum forever, forcefully dragging our family battle into a high-stakes emergency courtroom hearing. The atmosphere inside the wood-paneled courtroom of the county probate court was suffocatingly tense. Richard and Eleanor sat stiffly across the aisle, flanked by a team of expensive, sharp-jawed corporate lawyers who looked ready to tear our lives apart. My parents wouldn't even look in our direction, their faces hardened into masks of pure malice. Their lead attorney stood up and launched a blistering, aggressive opening statement, painting me as an emotional, meddling granddaughter who was overstepping her boundaries and portraying Grandma Evelyn as a deeply unstable, deteriorating woman who was entirely incapable of managing her own affairs and desperately needed to be placed in a locked state facility. For a moment, the weight of their lies made the room feel like it was spinning. But then, Arthur Vance stood up calmly, adjusting his glasses. He didn't offer emotional arguments. He offered cold, undeniable facts. He presented a hidden, certified psychiatric evaluation conducted by an independent board of neurologists just 6 weeks prior, proving with absolute medical certainty that Evelyn had been completely lucid and mentally competent when she executed a secondary, unbreakable, irrevocable trust. More devastatingly, Arthur plugged a flash drive into the court's media system, playing a secret, crystal-clear video recording of my parents explicitly discussing how they were going to abandon Evelyn at Terminal 2 to steal her land. A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom gallery. My parents' expensive lawyers sat down in stunned, defeated silence. Then the judge spoke. The older woman leaned forward, her face dark with absolute fury, and slammed her heavy wooden gavel down with a deafening crack that shattered my parents' dreams forever. She delivered a scorching, unforgettable lecture, stripping Richard and Eleanor of every single familial and legal right to the estate. She instantly initiated a full criminal investigation into grand larceny and elder abuse, officially naming me the sole, absolute guardian of Grandma Evelyn and the entire multi-million-dollar farm. 3 months after that fateful day in the courtroom, the dust had finally settled, and the poetically beautiful scales of justice had fully balanced themselves. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, learned the hard way that when you build a kingdom out of greed, it ultimately collapses into a prison of your own making. To avoid immediate, lengthy jail time for grand larceny and elder abuse, they were forced to file for absolute corporate and personal bankruptcy. Ostracized by their country club friends and completely stripped of their reputation, they were forced to sell their luxury assets and take menial jobs just to pay off their mountain of aggressive legal debts. Meanwhile, back at Whispering Pines, peace had beautifully returned to the land. I sat on the wide front porch next to Grandma Evelyn, watching the golden afternoon sun sweep across the brilliant green hills. She was happily sipping her favorite chamomile tea, her mind completely at ease knowing that her beloved heritage farm was forever safe from the concrete plows of greedy developers. Her memory still had its cloudy days, but she no longer carried the terrifying burden of wondering who she could trust. Her legacy was completely secure in my hands. With a portion of the farm's multi-million-dollar wealth, I officially established a dedicated community sanctuary and organic garden right on the property, creating a safe haven for vulnerable local seniors to connect with nature and find companionship. My parents thought their heartless betrayal would buy them a lifetime of luxury, but it only bought them absolute ruin. What would you have done if you caught your own parents doing